The rain pelted down mercilessly, turning Newark's quaint streets into glistening rivers. I huddled under my flimsy umbrella, cursing my decision to venture out on such a dreary day. As I scurried along the sidewalk, my eyes landed on a cozy-looking cafe nestled between two weathered buildings. The warm glow emanating from its windows beckoned me like a lighthouse in a storm. I ducked inside, the tinkling of the bell above the door barely audible over the sound of rain hitting the awning. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped me, and I felt my shoulders relax as I breathed it in. I shook out my umbrella and ran a hand through my damp blonde hair, grimacing as I felt the frizz starting to form. As I made my way to the counter, movement caught my eye. A tabby cat, with fur matted from the rain, darted between my legs and made a beeline for a table in the corner. I watched, amused, as it leaped onto an empty chair and began to lick its paws. "I'm so sorry," a voice called out. I turned to see a woman hurrying towards me, her green eyes wide with concern. "That's not my cat, I swear. He just showed up a few minutes ago." I couldn't help but smile at her flustered expression. "No worries," I assured her. "I'm more of a cat person anyway." She returned my smile, and I felt a little flutter in my chest. Her brunette hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and a few tendrils had escaped to frame her face. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, but somehow managed to make them look effortlessly chic. "I'm Ivy," she said, extending her hand. "Samantha," I replied, taking it. Her grip was firm, her skin soft against mine. We both turned to look at the cat, who was now curled up contentedly on the chair. "Looks like he's made himself at home," I chuckled. Ivy nodded, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Well, since he's claimed my table, would you like to join me for a coffee? It seems a shame to disturb him." I hesitated for a moment, my usual caution warring with an inexplicable desire to spend more time with this stranger. "Sure," I found myself saying. "Why not?" We ordered our drinks, a latte for me, a chai for her, and settled into a booth by the window. The rain continued to pour outside, creating a cozy cocoon around us. As we sipped our drinks, conversation flowed easily. We discovered we were both relatively new to Newark, drawn by job opportunities and the promise of a fresh start. Ivy, it turned out, was an ESL teacher at a local community center. "And what about you?" she asked, her eyes curious. "I'm a social worker," I replied. "I work with at-risk youth." Her face lit up. "That must be so rewarding," she said, leaning forward slightly. "And challenging, I imagine." I nodded, warmed by her genuine interest. "It is. Every day is different, that's for sure." As we talked, I found myself captivated by the way Ivy's hands moved as she spoke, the slight crinkle at the corners of her eyes when she laughed. There was something about her that drew me in, a warmth, an authenticity that I hadn't encountered in a long time. Before I knew it, an hour had passed. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the cafe was starting to fill up with the lunch crowd. "I should probably get going," I said reluctantly, glancing at my watch. Ivy nodded, a flicker of disappointment crossing her face. "Me too. But this was nice." We gathered our things and headed towards the door. As we stepped outside, I realized I didn't want this to be the end. "Would you like to exchange numbers?" I blurted out, feeling a blush creep up my cheeks. "You know, in case we want to grab coffee again sometime." Ivy's smile was radiant. "I'd love that." As we traded phones to input our information, our fingers brushed, sending a jolt of electricity through me. I tried to steady my hand as I typed, acutely aware of her presence beside me. With a final wave, we parted ways, heading in opposite directions down the damp sidewalk. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. A chance encounter, a stray cat, and a rainy day had conspired to bring Ivy into my life. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would change everything. Days passed, but Ivy lingered in my thoughts like a pleasant dream. I found myself replaying our conversation in the cafe, remembering the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the graceful movement of her hands as she spoke. It was ridiculous, really, We'd only met once, yet here I was, daydreaming like a lovesick teenager. I tried to focus on my work, burying myself in case files and meetings. But even as I counseled troubled teens and navigated the bureaucratic maze of social services, my mind would drift. What was Ivy doing right now? Was she thinking of me too? It was during one of these moments of distraction that I decided to treat myself to a new book. I needed something to occupy my mind, to stop it from constantly wandering to green eyes and a warm smile. The local bookstore was a quaint little place, crammed with shelves that reached the ceiling and the comforting smell of old paper. I was browsing the fiction section, my fingers trailing along the spines of novels, when I heard a familiar voice. "Samantha?" I turned, my heart doing a little flip as I saw Ivy standing there, a stack of books cradled in her arms. She looked even lovelier than I remembered, her hair loose around her shoulders and a soft blue sweater bringing out the color of her eyes. "Ivy, hi," I said, wincing inwardly at how breathless I sounded. "Fancy meeting you here?" She smiled, and I felt that same flutter in my chest. "I'm a bit of a bookworm," she admitted. "This place is my weakness." I glanced at the titles she was holding, a mix of literary fiction and language textbooks. "I can see that," I teased. "Planning on building your own library?" Ivy laughed, the sound sending a warm shiver down my spine. "Maybe. What about you? Found anything good?" I realized I was still holding a random book I'd pulled from the shelf. I glanced at the cover and blushed. It was a steamy romance novel, complete with a shirtless man on the front. "Oh, just browsing," I said quickly, shoving the book back onto the shelf. Ivy's eyes twinkled with amusement. "No judgment here," she said. "Sometimes a little escapism is exactly what we need." There was something in her tone, a hint of flirtation perhaps, that made my pulse quicken. I struggled to find a response, but Ivy saved me from my awkwardness. "Listen," she said. "I was just about to grab a coffee at the cafe next door. Would you like to join me?" I nodded, probably a bit too eagerly. "I'd love to." We made our purchases. I grabbed a mystery novel at random and headed to the cafe. It was a cozy place, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. We found a quiet corner and settled in with our drinks. As we talked, I found myself even more drawn to Ivy than before. She was passionate about her work, her eyes lighting up as she described helping her students master English. She was funny too, with a dry wit that had me laughing more than I had in months. "So," Ivy said, leaning forward slightly, "have you lived in Newark long?" I shook my head. "Just moved here about 6 months ago for work. It's been an adjustment." "I know what you mean." Ivy nodded. "I've been here a year, and I still feel like a newbie sometimes." "Do you miss home?" I asked. A shadow crossed her face. "Sometimes. But there wasn't much left for me there." I sensed a story behind her words, but didn't push. Instead, I found myself sharing my own experiences of moving to a new city, the challenges and the unexpected joys. Ivy listened attentively, asking questions and offering her own insights. As we talked, I couldn't help but notice the way the afternoon light played across her features, highlighting the curve of her cheekbone, the fullness of her lips. I caught myself staring more than once, quickly looking away when Ivy met my gaze. Time slipped away, and before I knew it, the sky outside had darkened. Ivy glanced at her watch and sighed. "I should probably get going," she said reluctantly. "I have an early class tomorrow." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "Of course. This was really nice though." Ivy smiled, and I swear my heart skipped a beat. "It was. We should do it again sometime." We stood up, gathering our things. As we walked to the door, Ivy suddenly turned to me. "Samantha," she said, her voice soft, "I'm really glad we ran into each other today." There was something in her eyes, a warmth and intensity that made my breath catch. "Me too," I managed to say. For a moment we just stood there, the air between us charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Ivy leaned in and kissed my cheek, her lips soft against my skin. "Good night, Samantha," she whispered, and then she was gone, disappearing into the evening crowd. I stood there for a long moment, my hand touching the spot where her lips had been. As I finally turned to head home, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The mystery novel I'd bought lay forgotten in my bag, but I didn't need it anymore. I had all the intrigue and excitement I could handle right here in the real world, in the form of a beautiful brunette with green eyes and a smile that could light up the darkest night. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of stolen moments and lingering glances. Ivy and I began to seek each other out, finding excuses to meet for coffee or take walks in the park. Each encounter left me breathless, yearning for more. One particularly balmy evening, we decided to take a stroll along the beach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Ivy looked radiant in the fading light, her hair tousled by the sea breeze. "I love it here," Ivy said, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "It's so peaceful." I nodded, acutely aware of how close we were walking, our hands occasionally brushing. "It's beautiful," I agreed, though I wasn't looking at the ocean. We found a quiet spot and sat down on the sand. The rhythmic sound of the waves provided a soothing backdrop as we talked about everything and nothing. Ivy told me about her childhood in a small Midwestern town, her dreams of seeing the world. I shared stories of my own past, opening up in a way I hadn't with anyone in a long time. As the conversation lulled, I found myself studying Ivy's profile, the curve of her jaw, the slight upturn of her nose, the way her lashes fluttered as she blinked. She must have felt my gaze because she turned to me, her green eyes searching mine. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. I swallowed hard, my heart racing. "I'm thinking about how much I want to kiss you right now," I admitted, surprising myself with my boldness. Ivy's breath hitched, and for a moment, I feared I'd overstepped. But then she smiled, a slow, beautiful smile that made my insides melt. "What's stopping you?" she whispered. I leaned in, my hand cupping her cheek. Our lips met, soft and tentative at first, then with growing urgency. Ivy tasted of salt and sweetness, and I lost myself in the sensation. When we finally parted, both breathless, I felt as though the world had shifted on its axis. "Wow," Ivy murmured, her forehead resting against mine. "Yeah," I agreed, unable to form a more coherent response. We sat there for a while longer, trading soft kisses and gentle caresses. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, we reluctantly decided it was time to head back. Walking hand in hand along the boardwalk, I felt a sense of contentment I hadn't experienced in years. But beneath the joy, a nagging doubt began to take root. What if this was too good to be true? What if I messed it up, like I had so many times before? Ivy must have sensed my unease because she squeezed my hand. "Hey," she said softly, "where did you go just now?" I sighed, trying to find the right words. "I'm just scared, I guess. This feels so perfect, and I'm not used to perfect." Ivy stopped walking and turned to face me. Her eyes were serious as she cupped my face in her hands. "Samantha, listen to me. I'm scared too. But I think what we have is worth being brave for, don't you?" I nodded, blinking back tears. "I do, I really do." She kissed me then, soft and sweet, right there under the twinkling lights of the boardwalk. As we broke apart, a group of teenagers walked by, wolf whistling and cheering. We both burst out laughing, the tension broken. The next few days were a blur of stolen kisses and longing looks. We tried to keep things discreet at work, but I'm pretty sure my coworkers noticed the extra spring in my step. I couldn't help it. I was falling hard and fast. One evening, as we cuddled on my couch watching a movie, my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, too content in Ivy's arms to care, but when it buzzed again insistently, I reluctantly checked it. My heart dropped as I saw the name on the screen. It was my ex-girlfriend, Kate. "Everything okay?" Ivy asked, noticing my sudden tension. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just work stuff. Nothing important." I silenced my phone and tossed it aside, determined not to let the past intrude on my present happiness. But as I snuggled back into Ivy's embrace, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get complicated. The next morning, I woke up to several missed calls and a voicemail from Kate. Listening to it while Ivy was in the shower, I felt a knot form in my stomach. Kate was in town and wanted to meet up to talk about things. I deleted the message, telling myself I'd deal with it later. But as I watched Ivy emerge from the bathroom, her hair damp and a soft smile on her face, I knew I couldn't keep this from her. Our relationship was too new, too precious to risk with secrets. "Ivy," I said, my voice shaky. "There's something I need to tell you." Her smile faded as she saw the serious look on my face. She sat down beside me, taking my hand in hers. "What is it, Sam?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "My ex-girlfriend is in town. She wants to meet up." Ivy's hand tightened on mine, her expression unreadable. And in that moment, I realized that the blissful bubble we'd been living in was about to burst. The tension in the room was palpable as I watched Ivy process the information. Her hand, still intertwined with mine, felt clammy. I could almost see the gears turning in her head, her green eyes clouded with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "Your ex," Ivy said slowly, as if tasting the words. "And she wants to meet up." I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, but Ivy, I want you to know that I have no intention of." She held up a hand, cutting me off. "It's okay, Samantha. You don't owe me any explanations. We've only been seeing each other for a few weeks." Her words, though true, stung. Was that all this was to her? A few casual weeks? "It's more than that to me," I said softly. Ivy's expression softened, but I could still see the wariness in her eyes. "It is for me too. But this is a lot to process." She stood up, running a hand through her damp hair. "I think I should go." "Ivy, please," I started. But she was already gathering her things. "I just need some time to think, Sam. I'll call you later, okay?" And just like that, she was gone, leaving me alone with a ghost of her warmth still lingering on my skin. The next few days were torture. Ivy's promise to call remained unfulfilled, and my attempts to reach out were met with brief, non-committal responses. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the ache in my chest. It was during this time that Kate made her reappearance in my life. We met at a neutral location, a bustling cafe downtown. As soon as I saw her, I was struck by how little I felt. The woman who had once been the center of my world now seemed like a stranger. "You look good, Sam," Kate said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Thanks," I replied, fidgeting with my coffee cup. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Kate launched into a long-winded explanation about how she'd been doing a lot of thinking, how she regretted the way things had ended between us. As she spoke, I found my mind wandering to Ivy, her laugh, her touch, the way she made me feel alive in a way Kate never had. "I was hoping we could try again," Kate finished, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled back, the decision crystallizing in my mind. "I'm sorry, Kate, but I've moved on. There's someone else." The hurt in her eyes was evident, but I felt only relief. As I left the cafe, I knew I had to fix things with Ivy. I couldn't let my past jeopardize my future. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the commotion at the convenience store across the street. People were gathered around, chattering excitedly. Curious, I made my way over. "What's going on?" I asked a woman on the outskirts of the crowd. She turned to me, eyes wide with excitement. "Someone just won the lottery. Can you believe it?" I chuckled, shaking my head at the fuss. It wasn't until I was halfway home that I remembered the lottery ticket stuffed in my wallet, bought on a whim weeks ago. With a mixture of amusement and mild curiosity, I pulled it out and checked the numbers against the ones flashing on my phone screen. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as I realized, with growing disbelief, that every single number matched. I stumbled to a nearby bench, my legs suddenly weak. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like me. But there it was, in black and white. I had just become a multimillionaire. My first coherent thought, oddly enough, was of Ivy. I wanted to share this unbelievable news with her, to see her beautiful smile and feel her arms around me. but the memory of her distant texts and unanswered calls doused my excitement like a bucket of cold water. As I sat there trying to wrap my head around this life-altering development, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ivy. "Can we talk? Meet me at our spot on the beach in an hour." My heart raced as I read and reread the message. Our spot. She still thought of it as ours. Hope blossomed in my chest, overshadowing even the shock of my newfound wealth. I arrived at the beach early, pacing along the shoreline as I tried to figure out how to tell Ivy about the lottery win. Should I even tell her? Would she think I was trying to buy her affection? Lost in my thoughts, I didn't notice her approach until she was right beside me. "Hi," Ivy said softly, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that took my breath away. "Hi," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, we just stood there, the crash of waves filling the silence between us. Then, as if a dam had broken, we both started speaking at once. "I'm sorry. I missed you." We laughed, the tension easing slightly. Ivy reached out, taking my hand in hers. "I'm sorry I pulled away," she said. "I got scared. My last relationship. It didn't end well. And when you mentioned your ex, all those old insecurities came flooding back." I squeezed her hand, my heart aching for her pain. "I understand. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. But Ivy, you have to know. What I feel for you, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced before." Ivy's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I feel the same way, Sam. These past few days without you, I've been miserable." Unable to resist any longer, I pulled her into my arms, capturing her lips in a passionate kiss. She responded eagerly, her body melting against mine as if we'd never been apart. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, I knew I had to tell her about the lottery. But as I opened my mouth to speak, Ivy beat me to it. "Sam, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her expression serious. "I got offered a teaching position in Japan." The words hit me like a physical blow. Japan. On the other side of the world. That's... wow, I managed, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "When would you leave?" "In 2 weeks, Ivy said softly. "If I take it." 2 weeks. The same amount of time I had to claim my lottery winnings. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. As we stood there on the beach, the future suddenly uncertain, I realized that my newfound wealth meant nothing if I couldn't share it with the woman I was rapidly falling in love with. But how could I ask her to give up this opportunity? And how would she react when she found out about my windfall? The sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. It was beautiful, but all I could focus on was Ivy's hand in mine and the weight of secrets between us. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mix of elation and dread churning in my stomach. Ivy and I had parted ways the previous night, with tentative smiles and promises to talk more, but the weight of our respective secrets hung heavy between us. As I stumbled to the kitchen for my morning coffee, my mind raced with possibilities and fears. I hadn't told Ivy about the lottery win. How could I? With her potential move to Japan looming over us, it felt like adding fuel to an already raging fire. But as I sipped my coffee and stared out the window at the bustling Newark Street below, I knew I couldn't keep it from her much longer. My phone buzzed, startling me out of my reverie. It was a text from the Lottery Commission, reminding me of my appointment to claim my winnings later that day. Reality crashed over me like a wave. This was really happening. I went through the motions of getting ready for work, my mind elsewhere. By the time I arrived at the office, I was a bundle of nerves. My coworkers must have noticed something was off, but I brushed off their concerned looks with weak smiles and vague excuses. Midway through the morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to see Ivy. I fired off a quick text. "Can we meet for lunch? There's something I need to tell you." Her response came almost immediately. "Sure. The usual place at 1? I spent the next few hours in a haze, barely able to focus on my work. When lunchtime finally rolled around, I practically ran out of the office. Ivy was already at our favorite cafe when I arrived, looking breathtakingly beautiful in a simple sundress. My heart skipped a beat at the sight of her, and I was struck anew by how deeply I had fallen for this woman in such a short time. "Hi," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Hi yourself," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the worry in her eyes. We ordered our usual, a chicken salad for me, a veggie wrap for her, and then fell into an awkward silence. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "Ivy, Sam, before you say anything," she interrupted. "I want you to know that I've been doing a lot of thinking about the Japan offer." I nodded, my confession dying on my lips. "And?" She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "I'm not going to take it." For a moment, I was speechless. "But, Ivy, it's such an amazing opportunity, are you sure?" She nodded, her green eyes intense as they met mine. "I'm sure. These past few days made me realize something. What I have here, with you, it's too important to walk away from." Joy and guilt warred within me. "Ivy, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know." I squeezed her hand, my heart full to bursting. "I'm so glad," I whispered, "because there's something I need to tell you too." But before I could continue, our food arrived, momentarily derailing the conversation. As we ate, we fell into easier topics, laughing and talking like we used to. It felt like a weight had been lifted, knowing that Ivy had chosen to stay. After lunch, we decided to take a walk in the nearby park. The sun was warm on our skin, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves overhead. It was perfect, almost too perfect. I knew I couldn't put off my news any longer. "Ivy," I said, stopping by a small fountain. "Remember how I said I had something to tell you?" She nodded, her expression curious. I took a deep breath. I won the lottery." Ivy's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? When? How much?" The words tumbled out of me in a rush. How I'd bought the ticket on a whim, how I'd only realized I'd won a few days ago, the staggering amount of money that was now mine. As I spoke, I watched Ivy's face carefully, trying to gauge her reaction. To my surprise, she started laughing. "Oh my God, Sam," she said between giggles. "Only you could drop a bombshell like that so casually." Her laughter was infectious, and soon I was chuckling too, the tension draining out of me. When we finally calmed down, Ivy pulled me close, her arms wrapping around my waist. "So, what are you going to do with all that money?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. I shrugged, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. "I honestly have no idea. It doesn't feel real yet." Ivy's expression softened. "Well, whatever you decide, I'm here for you, money or no money." I leaned in, pressing my forehead against hers. "I'm so glad to hear that, because all of this, it means nothing if I can't share it with you." We kissed then, soft and sweet, the world fading away around us. But as we broke apart, I noticed a group of people nearby, pointing and whispering. One of them had a camera phone out. Reality came crashing back. My lottery win wasn't public knowledge yet, but it soon would be. And when it did, our lives would change in ways we couldn't even imagine. As if reading my thoughts, Ivy squeezed my hand. "We'll figure it out together," she said softly. I nodded, trying to push down the anxiety rising in my chest. But as we walked back to our respective workplaces hand in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that our relationship was about to face its biggest test yet. The next few days were a whirlwind. Claiming the lottery winnings, meeting with financial advisors, dodging calls from long-lost relatives who had somehow gotten wind of my good fortune. Through it all, Ivy was my rock, her steady presence keeping me grounded. But as the media frenzy grew, and the reality of my newfound wealth began to sink in, I noticed a change in Ivy. She became quieter, more withdrawn. When I tried to include her in discussions about what to do with the money, she would smile and deflect, insisting it was my decision to make. One evening, as we sat on my couch surrounded by brochures for luxury cars and exotic vacations, Ivy suddenly stood up. "I should go," she said, her voice strained. "Ivy, wait," I said, reaching for her hand. "What's wrong?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "It's just, all of this. It's a lot to take in." As she walked out the door, leaving me alone in my suddenly too large apartment, I realized that winning the lottery might just cost me the only thing that really mattered. The days that followed Ivy's abrupt departure were a blur of loneliness and confusion. I threw myself into the logistics of my newfound wealth, attending meetings with financial advisors and lawyers, all the while feeling like I was merely going through the motions. The excitement of winning had faded, replaced by a gnawing emptiness that no amount of money could fill. Ivy's absence was a constant ache, her silence deafening. I tried reaching out, but my calls went straight to voicemail, my texts unanswered. I found myself wandering the streets of Newark, retracing the steps we'd taken together, searching for some trace of the happiness we'd shared. It was during one of these aimless walks that I stumbled upon a charity event at the local community center. The familiar setting tugged at my heart. This was where Ivy taught her ESL classes. Without thinking, I bought a ticket and slipped inside. The room was a sea of unfamiliar faces, the air thick with polite conversation and the clink of champagne glasses. I was about to leave when I heard it, Ivy's laugh, unmistakable even in the crowded space. My heart leapt as I turned, searching for her. And there she was, radiant in a simple black dress, her hair swept up in an elegant knot. She was deep in conversation with an older woman, her eyes sparkling as she gestured animatedly. I couldn't help but smile, drinking in the sight of her. As if sensing my gaze, Ivy looked up. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, the world fell away. Then her smile faltered, replaced by a look of surprise and something else, uncertainty, perhaps even fear. I made my way towards her, my heart pounding. "Ivy," I said softly as I reached her. "I didn't expect to see you here." She excused herself from her conversation partner, turning to face me fully. "Sam," she replied, her voice carefully neutral. "I could say the same about you." An awkward silence fell between us, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Can we talk, please?" Ivy hesitated, then nodded. "Not here," she said, glancing around at the crowded room. "Follow me." She led me through a side door and up a flight of stairs to a small office that I assumed was hers. The space was cluttered but cozy, filled with books and colorful student artwork. It was so quintessentially Ivy that it made my heart ache. As soon as the door closed behind us, the words tumbled out of me. "Ivy, I'm so sorry. I know things have been crazy lately, but I never meant to push you away. I've missed you so much." Ivy's composure cracked, her eyes filling with tears. "I've missed you too, Sam. But I don't know if I fit into your life anymore." Her words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" She gestured vaguely. "All of this, the money, the attention. It's a whole different world, Sam. A world I'm not sure I belong in." I stepped closer, aching to touch her but unsure if I should. "Ivy, listen to me. The money doesn't matter. None of it matters if I don't have you to share it with." A tear slipped down her cheek. "But it does matter, Sam. It changes everything. I saw how excited you were about all the things you could suddenly do, all the places you could go, and I felt left behind." Understanding dawned on me. "Is that why you've been pulling away?" "Ivy, I never meant to make you feel that way. Everything I've been thinking about, every plan I've made, it's all included you." She looked up at me, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "Really?" I nodded, finally giving in to the urge to touch her. I cupped her face gently, wiping away a tear with my thumb. "Really? Ivy, I think I'm falling in love with you." A soft gasp escaped her lips. For a moment I feared I'd said too much, too soon. But then she was in my arms, her lips crashing against mine with a desperation that matched my own. The kiss deepened, months of pent-up emotion pouring out of us both. I backed her up against the desk, my hands roaming her body as hers tangled in my hair. It was frantic, almost feverish, as if we were both afraid the other might disappear at any moment. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, Ivy's eyes were shining. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. Relief and joy flooded through me. I kissed her again, softer this time, savoring the moment. As things heated up once more, Ivy suddenly pulled back, a mischievous glint in her eye. "You know," she said, her voice low and husky, "I've always had a fantasy about doing this in my office." I raised an eyebrow, a thrill running through me. "Oh, really? Well, far be it from me to deny you your fantasies." With a playful growl, Ivy pushed me down into her chair, straddling my lap. Her hands went to the zipper of her dress, slowly pulling it down. I watched, mesmerized, as she revealed a glimpse of green elastic peeking out from beneath the fabric. "Is that?" I breathed, my fingers tracing the edge of the material. Ivy nodded, a blush coloring her cheeks. "I bought it the day after our first kiss. I've been waiting for the right moment to show you." I swallowed hard, overcome with desire. "It's perfect. You're perfect." What followed was a blur of sensation. The softness of Ivy's skin, the taste of her lips, the sound of her gasps and moans as we explored each other. We moved together with an urgency born of separation and reunion, our bodies speaking the words our hearts had been too afraid to say. Afterwards, as we lay tangled together on the small office couch, I held Ivy close, marveling at how right it felt to have her in my arms. "So," I said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "what happens now?" Ivy looked up at me, her eyes full of love and trust. "Now," she said softly, "we face whatever comes next, together." As we dressed and prepared to rejoin the party downstairs, I knew that no matter what challenges my newfound wealth might bring, with Ivy by my side, I could face anything. The real treasure, I realized, had been right in front of me all along. The morning after our passionate reunion in Ivy's office, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly. Groaning, I reached for it, careful not to disturb Ivy, who was still peacefully asleep beside me. As I squinted at the bright screen, my heart sank. The news was out. "Local woman wins Mega Millions jackpot," screamed the headline, accompanied by a grainy photo of me leaving the lottery office. I sat up, suddenly wide awake, my mind racing with the implications. Ivy stirred beside me, her eyes fluttering open. "What's wrong?" she mumbled, sensing my tension. I showed her the phone screen, watching as realization dawned on her face. "Oh, Sam," she said softly, sitting up and wrapping her arms around me. The next few days were a whirlwind of chaos. Reporters camped outside my apartment, long-lost relatives called incessantly, and my inbox overflowed with investment opportunities and charity requests. Through it all, Ivy was my rock, her steady presence keeping me grounded amidst the storm. But as the media frenzy continued, I began to notice a change in Ivy. She became more withdrawn, her usual vibrant energy dimmed. At first I chalked it up to the stress of our sudden notoriety. But one evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset, she finally opened up. "Sam," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know if I can do this." My heart clenched. "Do what?" She gestured vaguely. "This. All of it. The attention, the scrutiny. I feel like I'm losing myself in your shadow." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Ivy, please, we can figure this out together." She shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "I need some time to think. Some space." Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me alone with the dying light and a growing sense of dread. The days that followed were some of the darkest I'd ever experienced. I threw myself into managing my newfound wealth, attending meetings with financial advisors and lawyers, all the while feeling like I was merely going through the motions. The money that had once seemed like a blessing now felt like a curse, driving a wedge between me and the woman I loved. It was during this time that I received an unexpected invitation. A charity gala was being held at a luxurious beach house, and as Newark's newest millionaire, my presence was requested. My first instinct was to decline. But then I saw the cause. It was a fundraiser for ESL programs in underprivileged communities. Ivy's passion project. Without allowing myself to overthink it, I RSVP'd yes. The night of the gala arrived and I found myself standing on the terrace of a stunning beachfront property, surrounded by Newark's elite. The champagne flowed freely, and the air was filled with the sound of polite laughter and clinking glasses, but I felt out of place, adrift in a sea of strangers. And then, I saw her. Ivy stood across the room, looking breathtaking in an emerald green dress that brought out the color of her eyes. Our gazes met, and for a moment, the world fell away. Then she turned, disappearing into the crowd. I spent the next hour trying to work up the courage to approach her, all the while fending off well-wishers and potential business partners. Finally, I spotted her slipping out onto a secluded part of the beach. Taking a deep breath, I followed. I found her standing at the water's edge, the moonlight casting a silvery glow on her skin. She didn't turn as I approached, but I knew she was aware of my presence. "You look beautiful," I said softly. She glanced at me, a sad smile playing on her lips. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." We stood in silence for a moment, the sound of the waves filling the space between us. "Ivy," I began, my voice thick with emotion, "I miss you so much." She turned to face me fully, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I miss you too, Sam, but what?" I pressed, taking a step closer. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "But I'm scared. This whole situation, it's so much bigger than us, than me." I reached out, gently taking her hand in mine. "It doesn't have to be. Ivy, the money, the attention, none of it matters without you. You're what makes all of this worthwhile." A tear slipped down her cheek. "How can you be so sure?" Instead of answering, I pulled her close, capturing her lips in a kiss that poured out all the longing, all the love I'd been holding back. For a moment she stiffened, but then she melted into me, her arms wrapping around my neck as she returned the kiss with equal fervor. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, I rested my forehead against hers. "Because loving you is the easiest, most natural thing I've ever done," I whispered. Ivy's eyes searched mine, and I could see the moment her resolve crumbled. "Oh, Sam," she breathed, pulling me in for another kiss. We made love there on the beach, the sound of the waves and the distant party providing a backdrop to our reunion. It was passionate and tender, a reaffirmation of everything we meant to each other. Afterwards, as we lay tangled together on the sand, Ivy traced patterns on my skin. "So what happens now?" she asked softly. I kissed her forehead, my mind already racing with possibilities. "Now, we face this together. We use this money to do good, to make a difference, starting with expanding those ESL programs you're so passionate about." Ivy's eyes lit up. "Really?" I nodded, smiling at her enthusiasm. "Really. And maybe we could look into buying a little place of our own, somewhere quieter, away from the spotlight." "I'd like that," she said, snuggling closer. As we lay there, planning our future under the starry sky, I realized that winning the lottery hadn't just changed my financial situation, it had led me to the greatest prize of all, a love worth more than any jackpot. The sound of footsteps on the sand interrupted our reverie. We looked up to see a group of partygoers heading our way, cameras at the ready. The real world was intruding once again. But this time, as Ivy and I scrambled to make ourselves presentable, exchanging knowing smiles and stifled giggles, I knew we were ready to face whatever came next, together. 1 year. It's been 1 whole year since that fateful day when a random set of numbers changed my life forever. As I stand on the balcony of our beachfront home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I can't help but marvel at how much has changed. Ivy's arms slip around my waist from behind, her chin resting on my shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts," she murmurs, pressing a soft kiss to my neck. I lean back into her embrace, savoring the warmth of her body against mine. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," I reply, turning to capture her lips in a tender kiss. When we part, Ivy's eyes are sparkling with mischief. Lucky to have won millions, or lucky to have me. I pretend to consider this for a moment, earning myself a playful swat on the arm. Definitely you, I laugh, pulling her close again. The money's just a bonus. As we stand there, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple, I reflect on the whirlwind of the past year. The media frenzy eventually died down, but not before testing our relationship to its limits. There were arguments, tears, and moments when I feared we wouldn't make it. But we did. We emerged stronger, our love deepened by the trials we faced together. We decided to use my windfall to make a difference. Ivy's ESL program has expanded beyond our wildest dreams, now reaching communities across the state. I've set up a foundation to support various causes close to our hearts, from LGBTQ rights to environmental conservation. And yet, amid all the changes, it's the small moments that stand out most vividly in my memory. Lazy Sunday mornings spent reading in bed, impromptu dance parties in our kitchen, the way Ivy's face lit up when I surprised her with a rescue cat for her birthday. Hey, Ivy's voice pulls me from my reverie. Where'd you go just now? I smile, turning to face her fully. Just thinking about how far we've come. Remember that charity gala where we reconnected? Ivy's eyes soften with the memory. How could I forget? You look so handsome in that tux. And you were breathtaking in that green dress, I murmur, running my hands down her sides. I still can't believe you are thinking of walking away from all this. A shadow crosses Ivy's face. I was scared, she admits. Scared of losing myself, of not being enough for you in this new world. I cup her face gently, making sure she meets my gaze. You've always been more than enough, Ivy. You're everything. She leans into my touch, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I love you, Sam. So much. I love you too, I whisper, sealing the words with a kiss. As our kisses grow more heated, Ivy pulls back with a mischievous grin. You know, I have a surprise for you. Oh? I raise an eyebrow, intrigued. She takes my hand, leading me back inside to our bedroom. Close your eyes, she instructs. I comply, my heart racing with anticipation. I hear the rustle of fabric, then Ivy's voice again. Okay, open them. When I do, my breath catches in my throat. Ivy stands before me, wearing a familiar piece of green elastic lingerie. It's the same one from that night in her office. The night that changed everything. You kept it, I breathe, drinking in the sight of her. Ivy nods, a blush coloring her cheeks. I thought we could recreate some memories, and maybe make some new ones. I don't need any further invitation. In moments, we're tangled together on the bed, hands and lips exploring familiar territory with renewed passion. As we make love, I'm struck once again by how perfectly we fit together, how right this feels. Afterwards, as we lie wrapped in each other's arms, a comfortable silence settles over us. I trace lazy patterns on Ivy's skin, marveling at how this woman still gives me butterflies after all this time. Ivy, I say softly, an idea taking shape in my mind. Let's get married. She props herself up on an elbow, her eyes wide. What? I sit up, suddenly nervous but certain. I mean it. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? For a heart-stopping moment, Ivy is silent, then a radiant smile spreads across her face. Yes, she whispers. Yes, I'll marry you. Joy bubbles up inside me, and I pull her in for a deep, passionate kiss. As we break apart, both laughing and crying, I'm filled with an overwhelming sense of rightness. This is where I'm meant to be. The next morning, as we stand on the beach where we reconciled a year ago, Ivy slips a simple band onto my finger. I do the same for her, our hands shaking slightly with emotion. I can't wait to see what the future holds for us, Ivy says, her eyes shining with love and excitement. I squeeze her hand, my heart full to bursting. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. As we seal our impromptu engagement with a kiss, the sun rising behind us, I know that this is just the beginning of our story. There will be challenges ahead, no doubt. The world of wealth and privilege is still new to us both, and we're learning to navigate it day by day. But with Ivy by my side, I'm ready for whatever comes next. After all, we've already beaten the odds once. Who's to say we can't do it again? The future stretches out before us, full of possibilities. And as we walk hand in hand back towards our home, I can't help but feel that the best is yet to come.